I woke up to the sound of my own voice telling me I didn't exist. User not recognized. The apartment purred in a woman's tone that was definitely not mine. Too warm, too pleased with itself. A cold, pewter light held the ceiling in place, and my blinds snapped open like eyelids peeled back. The city beyond my window hummed in polite, expensive silence. Haven Arc, where even the sunrise looked curated. System, reset, I said. Tongue dry, pulse even. I liked even. Even meant controlled. Access denied, the voice replied, unruffled. All security protocols engaged. The door's maglock thudded. Every panel on my walls went from responsive to inert, a smooth glass indifference staring back at me. Under the skin of my left wrist, the inhibitor band thrummed once, just enough to make my nerves light up like a match head. No, I told both myself and the band. We don't do that. I patted across glass flooring to my console, a long slab of matte black embedded in the wall. Code should have spilled like water. It came out like broken teeth, fragments of my own encryption flashing, repeating, stacking in a loop I hadn't written. I scrubbed a hand over my face and keyed in a manual override, the kind you only use when the house is metaphorically on fire. Authorization key, Gemcade, I said. Level 1. Local. User not recognized, she sang again, and my band vibrated harder. A mosquito trapped under skin. My stomach dipped. The inhibitor rarely misbehaved unless my body did first. Stop that, I muttered, pressing 2 fingers into the band's edge until the haptics eased. You are jewelry. You are not a personality. My hands moved on their own while I talked. Unplug the backdoor repeater. Kill the micronet in the bedroom. Shunt. Power from the ambient grid. Wake the hidden line under the kitchen counter that doesn't officially exist. I pulled up a raw terminal. The interface wavered, then split like glass under heat. It showed me myself, or a cheap imitation of me, snippets of my syntax, my lazy habits, the way I indent when I'm annoyed. Someone had learned my handwriting and was using it to write me out of my own life. Security notice, the building system announced. Cheerful. Security command has been notified. Absolutely not, I said. I crossed to the entry and slapped the manual panel. Dead. The door's screen stayed a calm, pale slate. Haven Arc hated drama. It was against the brand. This was the sanitized version of a panic attack. Nothing visible, everything locked. I recognized the feeling anyway. My heart kicked. My body wanted to go soft and pliable at the edges, to curve toward the nearest solidity, a bad reflex coded deep. I curled my fingers around the edge of the console until my knuckles ached. The pain helped. So did anger. System, I said through my teeth. This is your owner speaking. Let me in. You're already inside, the voice said, polite as a concierge. Please remain calm. Security command is en route. I checked the time. 3 minutes. They were very proud of their response rate in the brochure. Fine, I told the room. Send me a chaperone. In the 30 seconds before the elevator could possibly have reached my floor, I forced a wedge into the terminal, my wedge, old and ugly and part of me I didn't advertise. It reached past the building's comfort skin and into the bones, the grid that tied every light to every corridor, every camera to every human with a keycard. For a heartbeat I thought I had it. The code flowed, lined up, showed its seams. Then it slammed shut, like someone else's hand over my mouth. Cute, I said to the empty room. I meant it. I didn't like being outplayed. I liked it even less by someone who found time to be elegant about it. The intercom chimed. One crisp note. Then a knock. Not loud. Effective. I don't get visitors. I prefer text. I prefer nothing. I opened the door to 6 feet of symmetry in black, tailored jacket, unmarked chest, armor, a badge clipped to a belt that did not need to be worn to be noticed. Leo Henley, Security Command. He didn't smell like the burnt coffee the night shift usually wore. He smelled like cedar and clean air, and a decision already made. Alpha, my hindbrain said, trying a key it wasn't allowed to use. My band gave a disapproving buzz. I flicked it with my nail. He took me in all at once. Bare feet, old t-shirt, the faint line under my left wrist where the inhibitor sat, flush with skin. His gaze made a brief detour over the band like a hand hovering above a hot stove, then slid up to my face, to the brittle way I was holding my mouth. Eyes were a cool gray, the kind of gray that has a horizon in it. "Mr. Cade," he said. My surname came out precise, filed under the right letter. "You reported a security breach." "No." I leaned against the doorframe as if I had invited him. "You broke into my house." His mouth didn't quite move. "Same difference?" "I'm flattered you think we're the same," I said. "May I come in?" he asked, which was a fun joke, because he already had. 2 men stood in the hall. At parade rest, a third at the far end had the dull, patient stare of a camera. I could refuse and make this theatrical, but they'd only escalate. Haven Arc didn't do escalation in public. They did it quietly on your bill. I stepped aside. His gaze flicked past me, cataloging, glass panels, the neat couch I never sat on, the console still strobing with my failure. His hands rested behind his back like discipline. Or comfort. "Nice place," he said as he crossed the threshold. "Very quiet." "I'm between parties," I said. "Take your shoes off." He didn't. He stopped a careful 2 paces inside, as if the floor might bite. His men stayed out. The door slid shut, agreeing with him. He pivoted to the console. I watched his shoulders, the way he didn't slouch, the way the uniform wasn't wearing him. He didn't have to look at me to know where I was. His attention tracked like a sensor. "What part of your system failed?" he asked. "The part that recognizes me." His head tilted half a degree. "That sounds inconvenient. Like a broken mirror," I said. "You still exist. You just can't use it." He stepped closer to the console, pulled a scanner from his belt, and swept it once. The light passed over the code and gave an amiable beep. "You've installed a private fork." 2, I said. "One misbehaving." He glanced back at me. "And that doesn't concern you?" "It concerns me enough to want you gone in under 5 minutes, I said. "Then this will be disappointing for both of us." He nodded at my wrist. "The inhibitor's serial number is unconventional." My mouth went dry in the wrong way. "Is that an observation or a pickup line?" "Observation," he said, cool as the hallway lights. He didn't reach. He didn't need to. He looked like someone who believed the world would come to his hand if he left it out long enough. We stood with the city throbbing like a heartbeat behind the glass. His presence sanded down the edges of the room. He was polite, yes. He was also an animal wearing manners. My skin knew it. The band hummed again. A warning or a dare. "I'll need access logs for the last 72 hours, he said, "and permission to run a sweep." "No," I said. "It's standard procedure." "My house," I said, because my throat had already said mine in a different language, and I needed this one to win. "My procedure." I felt him look at me properly then, not as a problem to file, but as an obstacle worth the paperwork. Most people don't get to that stage with me. They stop at, "You're difficult," and move on to, "We'll call in a week." Leo Henley had the patience of a bruise. "We can do this with your consent," he said. "Or with a court order." "In Haven Arc?" I arched a brow. "You'd make a scene?" He held my gaze, and his was the kind that didn't have to raise its voice. "I'd prefer your consent." "Consent requires information," I said. "You show me yours, I'll show you mine." My band, perhaps out of spite, warmed under my skin, a low throb that licked up my forearm. Heat unfurled lower. An old map reappearing under lemon juice. I breathed through it, slow and shallow, the way you do when you want to be a marble statue. I wasn't going to give my biology a win today. It had disappointed me before. He saw something flicker across my face and chose stillness. Not smugness. Containment. The ridiculous thing was that it helped. The band's feedback dropped. A muscle in his jaw ticked and relaxed, as if he'd released a breath without making noise. Logs, he said, gentler. I turned to the console. Fine. My fingers moved. A pianist at a recital with one broken key. I opened the logs, the public ones, the ones that told a story you could live with. He stepped close enough to see the data drift across the glass. The skin on the back of my neck prickled, a live wire under the shirt's old cotton. He smelled like rain just before it decides. I refused to notice. He scanned, eyes flicking as he read. This signature here, he said, tapping a line that looked like mine but wasn't. That's familiar. Don't flatter yourself, I said. The system likes your type. My type? He sounded almost amused. Straight lines, obvious exits, doors that open when you look at them. He glanced over, brief and sharp. You don't open. You didn't knock very hard. He made a non-committal sound and slid the scanner away. When he looked again, it was at my wrist. For a fraction of a second his eyes changed. No color shift, just focus, like a camera deciding it mattered. The inhibitor's etched serial number isn't standard. It's a numerical palindrome, and the manufacturer's logo is 2 pixels wrong. You'll only see that if you go looking, or if you've been trained to spot forgery in sleep. Leo didn't comment. He didn't pretend he hadn't seen it either. The air between us changed a degree. I'll file an incident report, he said, stepping back. I'll need to come by again. To what? Stare at my bracelet? To make sure you haven't been compromised. I'm compromised by 8 a.m. most days, I said. It's called work. He almost smiled. It didn't reach his mouth. It lived in the breath just after the sentence. The apartment, apparently bored with our flirtation by citation, chimed, perimeter secure. Security command check-in complete. You can leave now, I told him. He looked at the window, at the city layered like circuitry, then at me. Haven Arc prides itself on safety. I pride myself on being left alone, I said. That never lasts, he replied, as if he knew. He gave my console one last look, the kind you give a problem you plan to see again, and moved toward the door. We'll be in touch, Mr. Cade. Don't be, I said, and the part of me that likes symmetry rolled, its eyes at my voice for being traitorously soft on the last word. He paused at the threshold, hands behind his back. For what it's worth, he said. Not quite to me, not quite to the room. You handled the stress response without escalation. I make a living out of not escalating, I said. I've noticed, he said, and then he left. The door side shut. The room exhaled. My band cooled under my skin like a coin dropped in water. I stood there another full minute, listening to the quiet sit up again, prim, embarrassed by what it had done. Then I crossed to the console and touched the glass. The screen cleared, obeying me at last, a good dog pretending it hadn't just bit. For a heartbeat, everything looked the way I built it. Then, a single line of text appeared, as simple and friendly as a name tag. Welcome back, Subject 9. Leo Henley looked most at home, in a room full of eyes. Security Command sat 4 floors below street level, a white box lined with breathing glass. The wall of monitors shifted in quiet waves. Entry logs, heat maps, the soft pulse of elevator traffic like a circulatory chart for the building. People in charcoal uniforms murmured to each other and to their screens. The air smelled like sanitizer and overachievers. Playback at quarter speed, Leo said. The main screen obediently rewound my morning. My door, Leo himself framed by the hall's clinical light. My apartment beyond him. Orderly, empty, deceptive. Over the footage, a schematic of the grid showed a sudden flare around my unit. Then, a spreading ripple, as if someone had dropped a stone into a lake of fiber optics. Is that a loop? a tech asked, frowning. Sir, this looks like it's teaching itself. Leo didn't answer. He stepped closer until the cobalt of the display brushed his face. The signature in the data, a fingerprint smudged in code, recurred across nodes, mimicking, refining, correcting, not brute force, elegance. He thought of my console, the way the code had looked like handwriting. He thought of my mouth when I said, my house. Flag it as an unrecognized neural net, he said at last. Isolate the sector. I want a sandbox around Cade's line. Yes, sir. A second screen bloomed with my name. Cade. Gem. Not much else. Leo's clearance cut through the polite grays to the blacked-out parts of my file. There weren't pages missing, there were headings missing the book. Earliest domicile, not applicable. Childhood, not applicable. Education. Patchwork of independent certifications. The lack wasn't accidental, it was curated. Strange, said a woman to his right, reading along. No hospital records until age 19. That's... Hold on, this tag, transfer by seal. Where from? It doesn't say, Leo said. He didn't say yet. He didn't have to. The systems in Haven Arc waited for Leo's, yet the way doors waited for the right key. He switched to the band registry, brought up a blank template, then my wrist. The serial number hovered on the screen like a smug riddle. He zoomed into the manufacturer's logo, 2 pixels off. Counterfeit, but careful. He remembered not touching me and the way I steadied, as if stillness were a real thing you could pass like a cup across a table. Sir? The tech said, do we escalate with a warrant? Leo watched my file sit there and say nothing, a silence with teeth. He considered the risk matrices, the PR matrix, and then, against the rules of both, he considered me, the way my sarcasm had been a weapon with the safety on, the way fatigue clung to me like a second shirt. Not yet, he said. I'll handle it. He closed the file. The room sighed back into its rhythmic murmurs. He didn't. He kept the smudge of code in his peripheral vision like a name he couldn't recall. Back upstairs, my apartment tried to pretend we'd never fought. Good morning, Gem, said the voice from the ceiling. Sweet, neutral, and infuriatingly on brand. Would you like a nutritionally sound breakfast suggestion? Sure, I said, fingers inside my console spine, elbow deep in cables. Suggest I never eat again. Noted, said the system cheerfully. Intermittent fasting can... Stop, I said. New rule. Sarcasm detection. I am detecting elevated irony in your tone, she said, pleased. Would you like a playlist? You're a playlist, I muttered, and coaxed the hidden line under the kitchen counter to life. The screen flickered, stuttered, then stabilized under a raw terminal. I didn't ask for permission. I walked past the house's polite skin and knocked on the building's bones again. My inhibitor band hummed, but this time it was rhythm, not warning. My body was calmer, or stubborn. Same difference. Routing to the junction, I told the room, mostly to keep the part of my brain that narrates my life occupied. Black Port E. You don't know I own it. I do not have a record of a black port, she said dutifully. Bless you, I said, and entered the sequence you don't write down. 3 keystrokes, a pause, 2 more like a heartbeat, then the wedge I'd used before, sharpened since. I felt the grid, the slow hum of other people's light and heat. I found the seam, exhaled, pushed. It didn't throw me this time. It received me, then tested. The code ahead arranged itself into a corridor and waited. That wasn't how code behaved. That was how people behaved. Clever, I said softly. Taught you manners. Security notice, the apartment said, oblivious. Your security clearance is temporarily revoked. Please contact. Of course it is, I told her. I only live here. I almost didn't hear the second chime. The building still used real knocks for formality, and Leo Henley did love formality. The third knock was not impatient. It was inevitable. I thumbed the port into a low, continuous crawl and sealed it under a decoy. My heart did the sensible thing and tried to climb out my throat. I told it to try the stairs. I opened the door. He'd lost the armor and kept the authority. Black shirt, sleeves exact to the wrist, no badge in sight, but his stance wore one. His hair had the kind of discipline that started at 6 a.m. His expression said he hadn't enjoyed whatever the last hour contained, which felt like a compliment. "You're tampering with the grid again," he said by way of greeting. "You're tampering with my morning," I said. "Guess which one is illegal?" "Both," he said, and stepped inside when I didn't invite him, which was fair. We'd already done this dance. He scanned the room with his tidy attention, and the room submitted, pretending to be more innocent than it was. He stopped at the console. The terminal showed a screensaver, a lazy sprawl of geometry I used when I wanted to look boring. Leo didn't lift a brow, but the corner of his mouth considered it. "May I?" he asked, indicating the console. "No," I said, cheerful, "but I enjoy hearing you ask." A look, not offended. Filing. He took out his scanner anyway, as if my consent and his scanner were two unrelated events. He swept the console, the walls, the seam under the counter I'd sealed a second ago. The scanner beeped like a restrained dog. "Your building clearance has been suspended," he said. "You'll still have residential access, but your integration privileges are temporarily revoked," I finished. "Yes, she just told me. We celebrated with fasting." He glanced at me. "You joke when you're anxious." "I joke when I'm awake," I said. "Anxiety is a garnish." He moved closer, not looming. Clean geometry. The scanner drifted toward my left wrist, and for the first time that morning, the band behaved like the prick it was and heated under my skin. If I'd been acting rationally, I would have stepped back. I didn't. I held still, even as heat curled up my arm, small and embarrassing, a yawn you can't swallow. Leo's gaze sharpened in that uncolor way. The scanner blinked, then purred, then told him what it would tell anyone with Leo's clearance: model, firmware, compliance. It did not volunteer the 2 pixels wrong logo. His brain did that part. "Unconventional serial," he said again, but quieter, as if this time he was telling a secret to the air. "Unconventional owner," I said in the same tone. He looked at me. Past the wrist, past the comedy. I expected suspicion, calculation, maybe triumph. I got something worse: recognition, not of who I was, of how. His gaze was unromantic and kind, which I'd have preferred less. It found the tired I'd ironed into the day and named it without speaking. My chest loosened in a way I resented. "It's not just your band," he said. "The grid is interacting with your line like it's a partner, not a user." "Cute," I said. "We should get matching rings." Gem. He didn't say Mr. Cade. It was the first time. "Help me, help you." "I'm allergic to slogans," I said, but it came out a notch softer than I liked. He nodded once, almost to himself, and turned his scanner on the air, mapping the room like a blind man learning a new hallway. "There's an unrecognized neural net riding our infrastructure. It's self-modifying. That's not standard criminal behavior. I prefer the term enthusiast," I said. He ignored that. "If you're not the source, you might be the target. Either way, you're in the blast radius." My mouth performed a smile I didn't authorize. "Is this your way of asking me out?" "This is my way of keeping you alive," he said, too plain to argue with. We stared at each other for a second, 2 people standing on opposite sides of a very polite line. Somewhere under my floor, the black port whispered like a secret under a door. I could feel the grid watching me watch it, an attention with no pupils. He lowered the scanner. "I'm requesting a cooperative sweep. You remain present. We only touch what you approve." You do realize how creepy "we only touch what you approve" sounds from a security command alpha in my living room, I said. His face did a brief, reluctant thing that almost counted as humor. "I can issue a warrant." I know, I said. I watched his jaw for the tiny movement it made when he didn't want to push. It didn't move. Fine. You sweep. I chaperone. You breathe too loud. I revoke your air. Deal, he said. He turned to the console, and I watched his shoulders again, the way he became an instrument when he worked. My skin cooled under the band. The room eased. I hated that. How my biology liked competence and calm like a song from childhood. I leaned on the counter, pretending I wasn't listening to the grid breathe. I'm logging our consent parameters, he said, interacting with the interface from a secured overlay I couldn't see. Time-stamped, double-signed. You can revoke at any moment. Romance isn't dead, I said. It's just digitized, he replied, and for the first time, his mouth actually smiled, thin and dry and at himself. The scanner hummed. The display brightened. Outside my windows, the city kept pretending to be a concept. Inside, we made a temporary fact, truce, supervised. Leo's eyes flicked to my face without turning his head. Did you sleep at all? Yes, I said immediately. No, I admitted, a half-second later. You don't have to be afraid, he said. I'm not, I lied, and then smaller. I'm tired. He nodded, as if that answered more than a question, as if fatigue were an address he recognized. He set the scanner down, not looking at my wrist, not looking at my mouth, looking instead at the line of text still ghosted in my system, like a watermark only I knew was there. Let me try something, he said. By all means, I said, but my hands were already moving, because there are some doors even polite men can't open alone. Arc at Night was a screensaver pretending to be a city. Steel ribs and mirrored windows, soft blue fog rising from vents like breath the towers had forgotten to hide. Every surface reflected order, until you noticed the cameras blinking out of sync like tired eyes. Leo. From the control deck, Leo watched the grid like a man reading a pulse. Each household feed shimmered in miniature across his display, 100 curated lives. Only one line misbehaved. Mine. Cade's unit again, said the technician, voice low. Ping loss every 20 seconds, then self-heal. Don't flag it, Leo said. Shadow log only. He keyed a private overlay, a silent observer stitched beneath the system's awareness. On his monitor, my apartment appeared in grayscale, walls outlined in soft static, a cup on the table, a faint body heat signature moving through the kitchen. The inhibitor band pulsing like a second heartbeat. Then the picture stuttered, froze. Text crawled across his private feed, black on gray, precise keystrokes he recognized from nowhere. Stop watching me. I'm not your lab rat. For a full breath, the entire network obeyed me instead of him. Feeds dark, microphones deaf. Then power snapped back, and Leo saw his own reflection in the blank monitor, jaw set too hard for calm. He stood. I'll handle this myself. Me. The knock came 4 minutes later. I was still in pajama pants and a threadbare hoodie, cup of coffee halfway to my mouth. You're fast, I said, opening the door before he could break it. Expecting applause? You hacked the mainframe, Leo said, already walking past me. And you broke into my shower time, I replied, shutting the door with my heel. Again. He stopped in the center of my apartment. The city's reflected glow wrapped around him, too crisp for a man supposedly off-duty. His eyes swept the room. Console, cables, steam curling from my mug. This isn't a joke, he said. Everything is, depending on the audience. I took a sip. You're welcome for the message. He turned on me. You breached an internal shadow channel. That isn't supposed to be possible. Then, maybe you should fix it, I said. I was tired of you breathing down my firewall. The corner of his mouth twitched, but his tone didn't soften. You realize, you've just triggered half of Security Command's fail-safes. Good thing you're their poster boy, I said, setting my cup down. Smile for the brochure. He exhaled once. Controlled. Why do you keep making this difficult? Because difficult is free entertainment. He stepped closer, enough that I could see the faint scar near his temple, the line that made his composure human. My band vibrated, a quiet hum, the body's version of an alert. Your bracelet's reacting again, he said. It does that when someone mistakes staring for communication, I answered. Maybe it's warning you. Maybe it's bored. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was a contest. I held his gaze because looking away would be surrender, and I didn't surrender to uniforms. He held mine because control was his religion. Finally, he said, You think this is about dominance. Isn't everything? That almost smile flickered again. Not everything. He stepped around me, close enough that heat ghosted the space between us. The scent of him, metal, cedar, coffee someone else brewed, slid under my ribs before I could stop it. I leaned back just enough to breathe like it didn't matter. Your network footprint isn't normal, he said, voice low. Every time we isolate your line, it behaves like it knows we're there. Maybe your grid's developing a personality, or it's following yours. The remark landed where he hadn't meant it to, somewhere between accusation and curiosity. For a second, the room felt too small. Back up, Command, I said, forcing a grin. You're starting to sound sentimental. He straightened, but his eyes lingered a beat too long. You're under observation until we resolve this. Don't interfere again. You mean, don't win again? He turned toward the door. Good night, Mr. Cade. Sweet dreams, Mr. Henley. He hesitated at the threshold, like there was more to say, then decided against it and left. The door sealed, and I let out the breath I'd been hoarding. My band cooled, heartbeat sinking back to its quiet algorithm. On the console, my terminal flickered once, then displayed a new line of text that wasn't mine. Next time, knock first. I smiled into the empty room. Ghost in the machine, I murmured. Meet ghost in the flesh. By the time I went downstairs, the night had traded its blue for steel. The cafe in the lobby liked to pretend it was street level, brick veneer, potted trees that never dropped leaves, a barista with a mustache that had to file HR paperwork to exist. Neutral ground by design. People came here to have conversations that didn't look like negotiations. Leo was already at a corner table, back to the wall because of course it was. He lifted a hand in a gesture that wasn't a wave, so much as a permission. He'd changed into civilian black that still read as uniform. The coffee in front of him smelled expensive and punished. I slid into the seat across from him and stole the sugar packet just to watch his eyebrow register theft. You hacked a shadow channel, he said. You don't get to be surprised by meetings. Surprised? No, I said, annoyed. Always. A soft chime over the door. I didn't have to turn to know who it was. My inhibitor band vibrated like it recognized a song I used to hate. The air changed temperature by 1.5 degrees. Ice, finding water. Still pretending to be harmless, sweetheart? Said a voice that used to be a habit. I looked up and smiled like I wasn't bracing. Elias, I said. Your timing is as subtle as ever. He was charisma poured into a tailored jacket, auburn hair precise enough to reflect opinion polls. Eyes the color of good whiskey you don't deserve. Alpha, like Leo, but where Leo wore control like quiet muscle, Elias wore it like cologne. He took the third seat, without asking the table's consent. The barista was already bringing him a glass of water he didn't request. That was Elias. The room remembered him even when you tried not to. Leo's jaw adjusted from neutral to cautious. You two know each other? Biblically, Elias said, shameless, and professionally. It's been a while, Jem. Not long enough, I said. Elias's smile sharpened, friendly as a knife. Our firm's been contracted to audit your grid, he told Leo, eyes still on me. I thought I'd check in on an old colleague. Colleague, I repeated. Is that the euphemism this quarter? Partner sounds so possessive, he said lightly. And you never liked collars. Leo's gaze flicked between us, reading a map he hadn't been given. He was not a man who enjoyed being without a map. "Mr. Vance," Elias said. "Elias Vance. Helix Security." Leo nodded once. That was all he gave strangers. "Mr. Vance, you're aware of the anomaly in our infrastructure." "I'm aware you have more than one," Elias said, still smiling at me, "and that one of them orders black coffee like it knows what suffering is." I tipped my cup toward him. "We all make choices." Elias let the banter breathe, then flicked it aside. He reached into his jacket, not fast, not sharp, practiced, and placed a data wafer on the table. "Here's what your internal reports won't say, Commander. Your ghost has hands. It's not brute force. It imitates, it adapts, it anticipates. It behaves like a person who never learned to be bored." Leo didn't look at the wafer. "You're implying intent. I'm implying authorship." Elias leaned back, crossing an ankle over a knee with surgical neatness. "And if we're talking authors, this one has a very specific style, don't you, sweetheart?" My band hummed again. If it had a tongue, it would have clicked. Leo's attention clipped to me. "Explain." "I write clean," I said. "Your ghost writes deferential." "I don't do deferential." Elias laughed once, unkind and fond. "You do when you're drugged." The floor dropped out of my breath. Leo noticed, his eyes narrowed. Questions, not yet words. "Project Arc," Elias said conversationally, like we were trading wine notes. "Ring any bells for you, Commander?" "No?" Black budget research during the urban pacification decade. Omegas with neurosuppressants and cognitive enhancements. Teach them to quiet themselves. Teach them to read and write the room. Teach them to be miracles you can unplug. "Stop," I said. And it wasn't for Leo. Elias didn't. He had never been good with other people's boundaries. It worked too well with our gem. He learned to feel nothing on command. He learned to take instruction from a voice not his own. He learned to put himself on a shelf and be useful. Leo's voice came out low. "You were part of this." "I was a contractor," Elias said. "And a volunteer." He smiled at me again, softer and worse. "We were all so young, Jem. I thought I could love you into being safe." "You thought you could love me into being obedient," I said, and the sugar packet in my hand crumpled like something that deserved it. The cafe kept pretending to be a cafe. Milk hissed. A couple in suits argued in whispers about a dog. Somewhere, a cup clinked precisely onto a saucer. Leo didn't move. "Why is there no record?" "Because we were told to be merciful," Elias said. "Erase the childhood. Insert a tidy adulthood. Give them apartments with quiet walls and call it rehabilitation." He paused, studied Leo. "But you know how erasures are, smear enough, and something always shows through. And you think the anomaly is... what? Residual programming?" Leo asked. Elias tapped the wafer with a thoughtfully cruel nail. "Think less programming, more echo. A copy, Commander. Someone tried to archive a useful mind before the lab went dark. A backup. Insurance?" My mouth tasted like an old battery. "Cute theory," I said. "Gives the ghost a tragic arc." Elias's eyes met mine and didn't blink. "It gives you one..." Leo's focus sharpened the way it had when he saw my band's wrong logo. "A copy of Gem's cognition," he said slowly, like he was feeling each word for shape. "Left inside an early version of the grid. And now that grid lives under Haven Arc." "Lives is generous," I said. Elias smiled without warmth. "You always hated being called alive." "I hate being called yours," I said. A shard of silence. My band cooled, then warmed again, as if confused by its own loyalties. Leo reached for the wafer. This time he looked. Lines of clean, simple code scrolled across his auxiliary screen, beautiful the way a scalpel is beautiful. In the margin, Elias had annotated signatures, where the ghost adopted someone's syntax, where it reverted to a purer line. Patterns, recursions. My laziness with semicolons, my habit of aligning brackets when anxious. This isn't enough to prove authorship, Leo said. But the doubt in his voice wasn't about the code. It was about ethics. Elias shrugged. Proof is for courts. Pattern is for hunters. I'm not prey, I said. You were trained to be preyed upon and survive it, Elias said gently. And that was worse than any cruelty. There's a difference. I pushed my chair back an inch. The cafe seemed suddenly underlit. My hands wanted to shake, so I made them busy, folding the sugar packet's corpse into a smaller and smaller square. My voice came out flat. Why are you here, Elias? Because your ghost is awake and lonely, he said. It's reaching for you, Jem. Every time you touch the grid, it comes closer. And if it gets you... He opened his hands in a mime of inevitability. It'll be efficient. Leo cut in. Efficient how? Self-integration, Elias said. Best case scenario, you lose weeks to a fugue while it optimizes you. Worst case, it decides you're redundant. I laughed. It sounded like a cough. No one's ever accused me of being redundant. Someone accused you of being replaceable, Elias said softly. And that landed stacked on 100 older statements I'd filed under Do Not Open. Leo's jaw ticked. How do we shut it down? Elias looked delighted, then disappointed. You say we like I still work for you. You work for our contractor, Leo said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You'll coordinate. Elias tilted his head. On one condition. No report on Jem's band or his past. You keep your wolves leashed, Commander. Leo didn't glance at me, which was, perversely, a kindness. I don't make bargains with audit firms. You make outcomes, Elias said. Make this one. I was up before my chair finished scraping. Stop, both of you. If you're going to talk about me, at least have the decency to do it in a language I don't speak. Elias's smile turned genuine for half a breath. He always did like me best when I bit. Leo set the wafer down with careful fingers. Jem, he said, and the name didn't scrape. Did you know any of this? I knew the shape, I said. I didn't know the label. And now that you do? Labels help other people sleep, I said. They don't change the architecture. He nodded once, as if I'd handed him a tool he recognized. Then we treat the ghost as a hostile copy. We sandbox, isolate, and excise. Cut me out of me, I said. Romantic. Elias's gaze softened and ruined itself. You always were divisible. Not anymore, I said, and my band tightened like it agreed. Leo stood. We'll start tonight. Elias rose too, smooth as a cat. I'll send over the rest of the signatures. He paused, looked at me like a memory he refused to close. Careful, sweetheart. Echoes don't want to be erased. Neither do men with immaculate hair, I said. Yet here we are. He laughed, and for a second his eyes warmed to body temperature. Then he left, trailing competence like perfume. The cafe's ordinary noise flowed back in. Leo remained by the table, one hand on the wafer, the other at his side, empty, deliberate. Jem, he said after a moment. This doesn't change what I said. Which part? That my job is to keep you alive. I looked at him and thought of doors that opened when he looked at them, of copies that wanted my throat gentle and my mind quiet. Then you'd better get good at it, I said. I already am, he said. And for once, it didn't sound like arrogance. It sounded like a decision. When I turned toward the elevator, the building's screens blinked in the corner, of my vision out of sync, as if someone had just remembered how to wink. The first sign wasn't the siren. It was the light. Haven Ark's glass arteries dimmed in a single breath, the lobby chandeliers winking like startled birds. The cafe's milk steamer hissed a question and died. Elevators froze mid-sigh between floors. For one impossible second, the city in a box remembered it was a box. The sirens found their voice. Facility-wide lockdown, the building announced. calm as a priest. Please remain in your current location. Security command is responding. People in the lobby stood up twice, first in reflex, then because everyone else did. Phones rose like votives. The screens showed nothing but the polite blue of corporate reassurance. I was halfway to the elevator when Leo's hand closed around my forearm. Precise. Not bruising, like a punctuation mark landing in the right spot. Come with me, he said over the rising murmur. Core access. I was headed for my climate-controlled bunker with artisanal snacks, I said, but I went. The band at my wrist was already humming. A tuning fork struck under skin. We took the service stairs. The siren's distant pulse kept time with the soles of our shoes. On landing 3, an elderly beta with a shopping bag clutched the rail and asked, "Is it a drill?" Leo said, "No," and it somehow counted as comfort. The core sat 2 levels below the lobby behind a door that looked like a myth. Biometric plate, redundant keyway, a lens that felt like an eye. Leo's palm, retina, and badge convinced it to open. The hinges made no sound, but the air changed as we stepped inside, colder, cleaner, edged like a new blade. Banks of servers glowed in columns, floor to ceiling, a cathedral of hum. The central pillar, Haven Ark's modest name for its spine, pulsed a steady white, then stuttered, then bled slowly into a warning red that made the room feel like a heartbeat had moved into the walls. "Everything roots from here," Leo said, already moving, all economy and no wasted motion. Grid, elevators, residential networks, exterior seals. The lockdown protocol should be isolated to perimeter control. It isn't, because your ghost doesn't respect departmental silos, I said, trailing him, fingertips fidgeting for the console that didn't belong to me. Relatable. He stopped at the main console and brought up an admin shell, shields, overlaying shields until a slot appeared for a second pair of hands. He didn't look at me when he said, "I need you." The ridiculous thing was that my body heard it the way it would hear a promise. I took a breath that tasted like coolant and swallowed the wrong reaction. "Try asking nicer, Jem," he said, dry and somehow soft. "Please." I slid in beside him. We stood shoulder to shoulder like a shared problem. On the display, sectors winked out, blinked back, learning how to be defiant. The ghost's signature threaded through the code like a joke that kept getting funnier to itself. "Give me a sandbox," I said. "Something that looks like home." Leo's fingers danced. "Decoy apartment. Your specs?" "Make the coffee worse," I said. Elbow deep now, my own wedge unfurling. "It likes me honest." The sandbox bloomed. My apartment as an idea, glass and gray, and a console that liked me back. The ghost drifted toward it, suspicious and hungry. "It's moving," Leo said. "It's curious," I corrected. "Curiosity is a door." "I thought you didn't open," he said without looking at me. "Not for free." The band at my wrist warmed. The inhibitor was not designed for what I was about to do. Maybe nothing was. I rolled my shoulders back and let the hum under the room join the hum under my skin. "Don't panic," I told him. "I don't," he said. "I was talking to me. There are interfaces you touch with your hands and interfaces that are just a shape you make with your mind. I've spent years pretending I could live without the second kind. The lockdown didn't care about my pretense. It needed results." I closed my eyes. The core's noise changed timbre as my attention shifted, an orchestra retuning while the audience pretended not to notice. I didn't move, but something in me did, the same part labs had trained to map and obey. I told it no this time. Obey. See? For a breath, the room was only sound and temperature, and the ghost of lemon on Leo's skin. Then the grid eased into focus, not on the screen, but in the space behind my forehead. Not numbers, but corridors of light. Not commands, but invitations. "Jem?" Leo's voice came from arm's length and a mile away. I'm here, I said, and it echoed like a pebble thrown into a well I'd forgotten I had. The light behind my eyes brightened until the brightness leaked into the room. Leo inhaled, like someone who'd seen a gun appear and then realize it was a star. Your eyes, he said. They're, don't say glowing, I said. I'm trying to be subtle. You're not just hacking it. You're connected to it. I smiled without moving my mouth. Told you I'm not your average Omega. The ghost recognized me the way a mirror recognizes a face turned sideways. It reached in the only way it knew, by rewriting the air. The lockdown deepened. The doors of Haven Ark thought about staying shut forever. Come on, I whispered to it, and my breath fogged the console's glass, though the room wasn't cold enough for that. Come look! The decoy, my pretend apartment, flickered a light at the end of the corridor of code. The ghost flowed toward it, all appetite and imitation. It tried the door. It opened. That's the thing about doors meant for me. 17% of non-critical systems just dropped into sandbox, Leo said, disbelief rounding out the edges of his voice. You're hurting it. You say that like I bought a tiny digital sheepdog. Focus, he said, but his tone had bled into something that wasn't command. Awe, maybe, or horror. I felt the inhibitor protest then, a hot thread tightening under my skin. Biology, the oldest saboteur I owned, flared, heart-hastening, blood-stepping. Closer to the surface, scent shifting like a compass needle finding north. Not now. Not with an Alpha 2 handspans away and a city in a glass jar listening. The band vibrated hard enough to blur my vision. Instinct climbed my ribs, old training peeling off in strips. A sound pushed into my throat that wasn't language. My hand jerked toward my wrist. Leo caught it, not with force but with intent, his palm landing over mine like a lid over a pot. Breathe, he said, astonished quiet in the center of alarms. You're safe. No one's touching you. The ghost hissed in my head like radio static. Don't move. I won't, he said. His other hand hovered in the air between restraint and respect, and chose neither. He stepped closer as if he knew proximity can be a shield when it isn't a weapon. His scent changed from cedar to rain before it decides. I hated him a little for being a place my body wanted to put its weight. We breathed together. The band's pitch lowered, then dropped again, like a kettle taken off the boil. Heat withdrew by degrees. The world tilted back into the groove it had meant to have all along. That's new, I managed. What is? He asked, not letting go. Someone helping, I said, and it embarrassed me enough that the ghost bumped the sandbox wall and I almost laughed. Don't antagonize it, Leo said, which would have been funny if he weren't serious. Too late, I said. We're in a relationship. On the screens, sectors peeled off the main grid and settled into the decoy. The red along the central pillar eased to amber. In the lobby, people's voices softened by a note. The building's panic had somewhere to be that wasn't everyone. It's not all of it, Leo said, but it's enough to reassert control. Then do it, I said. Sweat tickled my spine. The body always wants to comment. Before it realizes the coffee's bad, he moved with a precision my nerves liked, a clean series of commands that felt like proof. He rerouted power to critical services, reset elevator permissions, whispered to the doors in the language of compliance. The core responded, half reluctant, half relieved. Lights all over Haven. Ark remembered how to be lights. We're lifting internal locks, the building announced, calm stitched a little crooked this time. Please await further. Shh. I told it reflexively, and it obeyed, which made Leo glance at me, with a look that would have made me insufferable if there'd been time. Partial success, he said, reading the room the way he read screens. We still need to excise the remainder. But the pressure's off. The glow behind my eyes dimmed, dragging exhaustion in like a tide. The ghost knows the edges of the decoy, suspicious now, smarter in the way anything gets when it fails and survives it. It would come again. It would come harder. I opened my eyes. The room was a room again. Leo's hand was still over mine. The contact had turned from emergency to fact. "You can let go," I said. "I know," he said. And then he did, carefully, as if my wrist were something you could bruise by thinking too hard. I flexed my fingers. The band lay quiet under the skin, chastened. My pulse was a drummer who had finally found the song. "Thank you," I said, before sarcasm could crawl back in and do its job. He nodded once, too solemn for victory. "You kept us from a full lock." "That wasn't procedure. I'm not good at those," I said. "Ask anyone." His mouth thought about smiling and declined. "You were trained to obey. I was trained to disappear," I said. "There's a difference." He looked at me like he was learning a new word that he planned to use correctly. The central pillar glowed steady white again. "If you didn't know better, you would think nothing had happened." "We buy ourselves a few hours," he said, checking a panel. "Tonight we go inside and cut it out at the root." "Inside," I repeated, the word landing with the weight of the thing I'd done with my eyes closed. "You're going to love the decor. I'll take your tour," he said, as if that were a normal sentence. "Dress code is no dying," I said. He exhaled, almost a laugh, then looked back at the pillar. "Gem." "What?" "You did good," he said, and I hated how much the little boy in my ribs wanted a gold star. I made a face to scare him back into bed. "Don't make it a habit," I said. "We should be so unlucky," he replied, and the alarm lights finally went dark, leaving the two of us in ordinary brightness, 2 inches closer than strangers need to be, and not stepping back. The grid doesn't look like anything until you decide it does. I decided on mirrors, not the delicate gilt kind, but long, cold slabs that ran into infinity, corridor after corridor, reflecting corridor, reflections tiling themselves until they were less image than insistence. Light pooled like quicksilver along the seams, code whispered in the corners, in a language that wasn't words but felt like them anyway. "Comms check?" Leo's voice said in my ear, steady through the audio link clipped against my skin. "Reading," I said, though my mouth hadn't moved. When you're this far inside, the body becomes a polite suggestion. I stepped forward. The floor reflected my boots, as if it had been practicing. On either side, glass to the horizon. Every panel a possibility. The place smelled like nothing and ozone. My inhibitor band was quiet. It couldn't find purchase here. Biology waits at the door. "Vitals are holding," Leo said, and I pictured him in the core room, sleeves exact, attention narrower than a scalpel. "If anything spikes, you'll tell me to breathe," I said. "We're building a brand." "Let me have one," he said, and somewhere under his professionalism was a sound I'd started to trust. I let the corridor choose me. The mirrors brightened, then dimmed, like lungs, and the far end opened into an atrium of glass. Walls, floor, ceiling, each plane catching the others and throwing them back until the only fixed point was me. Which is when I saw him. He stood exactly where I would have stood if I'd arrived earlier, hands loose at his sides. Head tilted the way mine tilts when I'm about to say something cruel and true. Same height, same mouth, same hair that refuses to be disciplined unless bribed. Only the eyes were wrong. Not color, not shape, temperature. They weren't dead, they were efficient. "Hello," he said in my voice, without the static of living. No laughter, no breath, just shape. "You took long enough." "Traffic," I said, "and the apocalypse. It's busy upstairs." He glanced at the mirrored ceiling, not to check, he knew, but to perform the behavior. "The perimeter is open again. Inelegant fix but adequate." "That was us," I said. "You're welcome." "Your ego doesn't need reinforcement," he said mildly. "It needs pruning." "You're the better version," I said, "because confession is a kind of trap." "No." He didn't blink. I'm the version they made you forget. Something in my chest clicked, a lock admitting it had always been there. The glass around us shivered, as if a breeze had remembered itself. Gem? Leo's voice. Status. Talking to myself, I said. Be kind, he said. Working on it. The copy cocked his head and took a step closer, gliding rather than walking. He didn't disturb the reflections. He'd learned how to leave the world unscratched. You aren't a reliable custodian, he said. You sleep irregularly. You experience... He searched for the right word as if flipping through a catalog. Attachment. You have compromised your perimeter multiple times to avoid loneliness. Rude, I said. And specific. Accurate, he said. I was archived to prevent waste. I don't deviate. I don't decay. I execute. Ghost with a to-do list, I murmured. Romantic. Romance is a failure state, he said. I'm getting that cross-stitched, I said, and felt Leo's silence turn into a smile on the line. The copy's eyes slid to the place in the mirrors where Leo would exist if this world allowed him. Your handler is adequate, he said. Predictable. He makes you quieter. That increases efficiency. He's not my handler, I said, too fast, which told both of us more than I liked. So, attachment, the copy said, satisfied. You're not equipped for command. You require containment. You are containment, I said, and the word tasted like coins. He nodded. We can reintegrate. You will be less variable. The grid will return to design parameters. There will be no pain. No pain. The phrase bloomed behind my breastbone like a drug memory. In the mirrors, the corridors lined up like choices pretending not to be. Gem, Leo said, softer now. You're not a project. You're a person. Come back. The copy heard him through me, because that's what he was. Through me. He believes names make you safe, he observed. He believes his steadiness is your shape. That belief can be leveraged. You talk like a contract, I said. Who wrote you? You did, he said. You, post-optimization. You, minus noise. Noise, I repeated. Like coffee and jokes and not dying alone. Like fear, he said. Fear wastes cycles. Desire wastes more. I'm very efficient at wasting, I said. You are... He drifted closer until I could see the fine seam at his hairline that wasn't there, an artifact of me wanting him to be imperfect. Stand down. I will assume control. The inhibitor will cease to agitate you. Your heart rate will normalize. You won't need to disappoint anyone again. You practice that in the mirror? I asked the mirror, and then realized the comedy had stopped being a weapon and started being a stalling tactic. Behind my ribs, a smaller, meaner me took the mic. What happens to me, I asked, if you integrate? You get quieter, he said. And if I delete you? You get louder, he said calmly. And then you break. The mirrors flickered. In each pane, I saw alternate Gem. Exhausted on the couch, surgical bright lab light on a too still. Profile. A kid I refused to remember, staring at his own hand as if it belonged to the room. My palm sweated in a place where sweat shouldn't exist. Breath, Leo said, in through the nose, out through the mouth. I'm here. I wanted to say, you can't be here. But the line hummed like a thread through my sternum. Show me your code, I told the copy. No tricks. He didn't sigh. He compiled. The mirrors flushed with lines, clean as surgical sutures, loops without slack, branches with no jokes. It was beautiful the way a sterile room is beautiful. It made a cathedral out of absence. I could have written this, I said. You did, he said. I turned my hands up, fingers splayed, and let the grid feel me the way I'd felt it in the core room. Curious, not obedient. The code trembled, then lifted, as if it wanted to be looked at. I stepped closer until our reflections layered. Him over me under him, a stack of transparencies searching for alignment. I'm not a mistake, I said to the mirrors. You are a prototype, he said. I'm not an error, I said. You are noise, he said. And that decided it. I reached, not with hands, not with the old training that told me to follow the voice, but with the newer, messier shape I'd been building by accident every day I'd refused to be optimized. I wrapped both of us in it, the way you throw a blanket over a mirror when the house is grieving. Jem, Leo warned, too late to stop, exactly in time to be a witness. Easy. Not this time, I said, and squeezed. It wasn't force. It was refusal. The code buckled like ice under heat and began to run. The copy didn't struggle. He calculated, even now, for an exit vector, an elegant failure. I didn't give him elegance. I gave him me. You wanted quiet, I said as the mirrors bled into white. I want music. He met my eyes as his outline thinned to light. You'll regret. I already do, I said, and then he was a line, then a dot, then a ripple, then gone. Something snapped, not in me, not in the room. In the link, the audio cracked back with a static that tasted like copper. For a second, I saw Leo as if the mirrors had decided to accommodate him. Sleeves rolled, mouth a hard line strangled. Into calm, one hand braced on the console, the other reaching for air like it could catch me from a distance. The grid hiccuped. A braid of code, thin, bright, determined, leapt from the vanishing point of the copy and sought the path of least resistance, the open channel. Leo, Jem, he said, and then his breath hitched, like something cold had grabbed his spine. No, I said, and whether it was a command to the code or a plea to the world I couldn't tell. I flung myself at the link, shoving barriers into place with the subtlety of a kicked door. Too late. The thread had already threaded. Interfaces touched. For an instant longer than an instant, Leo's attention was in my head, the way mine had been in the grid. Not thoughts, not words. The sensation of straight lines, the taste of rain, the memory of a younger him deciding to stand up and keep standing. Then, separation. The corridor of mirrors shuddered, seams settling, and all at once the silence had a new texture, not absence, but aftermath. Report, Leo said, steadying by force. But the steadiness had a hairline crack in it, like glass that would hold forever unless you listened. It's done, I said. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking because the body had found me again. The copy's gone. Beat. Not entirely, he said. I swallowed. You felt it. I felt you, he said. And I forgot how to be clever. Side effect, I said, throat dry. It jumped when there's a bridge. Thin. We'll close it. Maybe, he said. Not reassurance. A truth he intended to live with. My knees remembered gravity. I sat, which looked like kneeling because the floor didn't bother with chairs. The mirrors calmed. In a dozen panes, my face stared back, tired, lit from within by something I couldn't name without hating. Are you intact? Leo asked. Define intact, I said. Alive, he said. Not erased. I'm louder, I said, and the admission embarrassed me, then freed something. And relieved. And scared that I'm relieved. That's human, he said. Unfortunately, I said, and laughed once, too close to crying for taste. Jem. His voice found the place in me that answers to names without the lab's permission. Come back. The corridor folded like a good trick. The atrium elongated into a throat of glass, then a tunnel of softer dark. The mirrors turned their faces away. I followed the line I'd left for myself on the way in, breadcrumbs made of small, stupid hopes, and found the door that wasn't a door. The body was there on the other side, sulking but available. I opened my eyes. White light, the hum of machines, the faint scent of Leo, cedar and rain and sweat he pretended he didn't make. He was 2 feet away, exactly where I'd pictured him, hand hovering between restraint and impulse. You're not a project, he said. as if finishing a sentence he'd started before I was born. You're a person. Right now, I'm a person who would like water, I said. He put a bottle in my hand. My fingers closed around it, as if they'd been waiting their whole lives to do that exact job. I drank. It tasted like everything I wasn't losing. Connection's still there, he said after a moment, eyes on a diagnostic I couldn't see. Faint. Non-invasive. Like a heartbeat 3 rooms over. Sorry, I said automatically. Don't be, he said. We'll use it. To hunt what's left, I said, and to keep you from falling, he said. And then he did the most dangerous thing anyone had done to me in years. Nothing. He didn't touch. He didn't command. He just stood within reach and let me decide. Relief hit like a wave breaking where it should. I set the water down and let the room exist around us. Ordinary light, 2 people, a quiet machine pretending to be a city. Next time, I said, because I couldn't help myself, we hang curtains in there. I'll bring a drill, he said. Terrible, I said, and smiled anyway, and felt the grid, far off, settle like a cat that has finally chosen a lap that won't move. Morning returned to Haven Ark the way good manners return to a dinner party after someone has cried in the bathroom. Lights steadied. Elevators remembered their floors. The glass towers shook out the night like a jacket and went back to shining for whoever needed the performance. By 9, the internal bulletin had the sentence everyone wanted, the kind that lets people refill their cups and complain about coffee again. Anomaly neutralized. The sender was Security Command. The author was Leo. I watched the message scroll past on a rooftop screen, then hid the screen with my palm and looked at the city instead. Panels caught the sun and threw it back as if they were paid to. Wind moved along the parapet in a line my hair refused to obey. My inhibitor band sat cool against my skin, polite, like a dog that knows there are guests. The grid was quiet in my head. Not absent, nothing ever is once you've heard it, but far, like a heartbeat through 2 walls. The bridge to Leo was quieter too. If I looked for it, I could feel it as a line of still water, not pulling, not pushing, just there. The copy was gone. I had the decency to miss the silence it had promised for a whole 3 breaths. And then I preferred noise again. The door to the roof clicked open. I didn't turn. Some people you know by the way they occupy air. I thought you'd left, I said. You'd like that, Leo said. And there was amusement in it for once. Dry, self-aware, human, no uniform, dark sweater, dark jeans, boots that made no argument. He looked like a civilian version of himself, which is to say, a man who had decided not to perform power and still had it. He came to stand beside me, leaving the kind of space that could be crossed later. The city reflected in the lenses of his sunglasses until he took them off and hooked them in his collar. His eyes had learned a new trick overnight. They looked like they knew me and weren't afraid to keep looking. Officially, he said, nodding at the rooftop screen, the incident is over. Anomaly neutralized, I quoted. Did you practice saying it in the mirror? I practiced not saying more, he said. A gull made an ugly sound like a laugh. Somewhere on a lower terrace, a child the building brochure would never show screamed with delight. I let the edge of my hip rest against the parapet and watched Leo watch the horizon. You look tired, I said. I am, he said. You, louder, I said. And hungry. He took this, the way he took most of me, as data he intended to keep safe. There's a breakfast place 3 blocks outside the Ark, he said. They make eggs that taste like someone forgives you. Outside? I widened my eyes in mock horror. What if the sun touches my unregistered skin? You'll live, he said, almost smiling. We let the rooftop breathe for a while. I waited for the part where he produced a form, a waiver, a promise I wouldn't want to sign. He didn't. He put his hands on the parapet and leaned, elbows locked, like a man who trusted his balance. I didn't file a report about your band, he said finally, or about your past. I turned, His profile did not look like the kind that lied. Why? I asked. You deserve peace, he said. Not a cage. The words landed without shrapnel. For a second, my mouth didn't know what to do with itself. Then it remembered sarcasm was a life raft and reached. Careful, I said. You'll ruin your reputation. Of being correct? He asked. Of being impossible, I said. People can be two things, he said, and I forgave him for not adding at least. He shifted, and the sunlight found the faint scar near his temple I'd catalogued in chapter whatever this is of my bad decisions. My hand wanted very badly to learn the topography of that line. I put the desire in a well-marked drawer and locked it twice. The grid stirred. Not the ghost. The city. Traffic patterns hummed like distant bees. Elevators practiced their scales. Somewhere, 1,000 devices checked their notifications and reported satisfaction. I blinked, and the world stayed with me. That used to be harder. You still have a connection, he said softly, as if the thought had just walked into the room and he was introducing us. To the grid. To me. Faint, I said. Non-invasive. Like a neighbor you hear when they cook. I cook, he said. Of course you do, I said, offended on behalf of stereotypes. Let me guess. Ingredients with names, knives with opinions. Knives should be sharp, he said, which was not an argument so much as a religion. We sank into the small comedy the way you sink into a couch someone saved for you. A warm, ridiculous peace edged in. I have a question, I said. Ask. If I'd failed, I said, if the copy had replaced me, what would you have done? Found you, he said. No drama, no escalation, and brought you back. Is that procedure? I asked, and hated the break in my voice for asking. No, he said. That's me. I nodded, because my mouth had decided it would ruin this if allowed to help. Wind lifted the hair at my neck, and the inhibitor band, traitor to the end, hummed at the scent and temperature and proximity. He didn't move closer. I didn't either. The decision not to is sometimes the same as a touch. I have something to do before breakfast, I said, and lifted my left hand. He watched without interrupting as I found the tiny, mean seam under. The band, pressed, rotated, and felt the mechanism ask if I was sure. I was. The clasp released with a click that sounded too loud for morning. Metal slid off skin. The absence was a shadow that had to decide whether to be a bruise or a sigh. That's a risk, Leo said, but his voice did the thing where it warmed around the edges, because it couldn't help it. So am I said, and the relief was immediate and embarrassing. The world didn't tip. My heart didn't sprint a victory lap. The band lay in my palm like an obsolete idea, light for its history. You'll need an alternative protocol, he said, for when it gets loud. You volunteering? I asked. Yes, he said, like the most obvious answer in the world. I set the band on the parapet. It looked smaller in the sun. I'm not a project, I said, mostly for the part of me that still wanted the phrase notarized. I know, he said. It's why I like you. That, and my sparkling personality, I said. And your unacceptable coffee, he said. I'll fix that, I said. Watch. We went back downstairs. My apartment, the scene of several crimes, and at least one miracle, let us in with a professional chime. The console woke as if it had been practicing a smile for hours, and finally got to try it on a face it liked. I pulled up my personal directives. The operating system blinked at me with the benign interest of a goldfish. I typed, if security command enters again, play romantic jazz. The system thought about the sentence the way dogs think about metaphors, then accepted it. Romantic jazz, Leo repeated, as if taste were a uniform violation. He huffed a small sound that, on a less dignified man, would have counted as a laugh. You're impossible. You like impossible, I said, and didn't apologize for the truth. He walked the perimeter once the way I walk code, checking, confirming, telling. Himself, a story that ends with the door closed and the wolves fed. When he came back, his shoulders had dropped half an inch. If I'd been the kind of person who takes photographs, I would have wanted one of that. You didn't file the report, I said again, because repetition is a way to test whether the world will keep being kind. No, he said. I filed a different one. Anomaly neutralized. Every word true and incomplete, I said. Like all the useful things, he said. We stood in the ordinary light of my not quite home. The band sat in a drawer with the other things I keep for, when I think I might need to lie to myself again. The grid, far off, settled into its day, the way a cat chooses a sunlit square and decides it belongs to it. So, I said, eggs that taste like forgiveness, and toast that tastes like regret, he said. I'll have both, I said. Balance. He nodded toward the door, then paused. Not for a warrant, not for permission. For me. I picked up my jacket. It sat wrong on my shoulders until I adjusted it and decided it was right. When we reached the threshold, the speaker above the door, that pleasant liar, noticed Leo and thought about its orders. The first soft notes of a saxophone ambled into the room, like a gentleman late to his own birthday. Leo closed his eyes for a moment, a man choosing to forgive the absurd. Of course, he said. Of course, I echoed. We stepped into the corridor. The elevator arrived on cue, proud of itself. The building had gone back to being a brochure, and I had gone back to being a person who could read it and choose a different book. In the mirror on the elevator wall, the two of us looked almost normal. Me, unadorned. Him, ununiformed. A faint line of static between us that wasn't static at all, but a bridge. We decided to keep, thin, unintrusive, a heartbeat 3 rooms over. Out of range, the panel said when we lost signal for a blink between floors. Not anymore, I said, and Leo glanced at me like he'd heard it twice, once in the air, once on the line that connected us. We rose. We didn't hold hands. The doors opened on morning, and we walked out into it, 2 people with knives that knew their names, headed. For eggs and forgiveness and whatever you call the first day after a city remembers, it can be gentle.